She wore the uniform. She served her country. But on this street, they only saw her skin. It was supposed to be a normal drive home. After a grueling 10-week deployment near Sacramento working with a classified K-9 military unit, Sergeant Maya, Lewis was finally heading back to her small apartment outside San Diego. She was exhausted. Her uniform still smelled like desert sand and gunpowder. Her two loyal companions, Rex, a black German shepherd, and Shadow, a tan Belgian Malinois, lay quietly in the back seat of her government-issued truck, eyes alert but calm. They weren't just pets, they were soldiers. Maya had served 3 tours overseas. She'd cleared landmines, captured insurgents, and saved lives using the incredible instincts of her dogs. Her record was spotless. Her reputation? Impeccable. She had medals, certificates, and battle scars to prove it. But none of that mattered here. She pulled off the highway to grab a coffee and stretch her legs in a suburban town just outside Stockton, a quiet, well-manicured neighborhood filled with American flags, picket fences, and unspoken tension. As soon as she stepped out of the truck, a few people across the street stopped and stared. A tall black woman in camouflage with 2 military dogs. Within 5 minutes, everything changed. Maya had just walked into the coffee shop when she noticed it, a police cruiser slowly circling the block, then another, then another. She knew that formation. She'd seen it in Iraq. It was how you surround a threat, except this wasn't a war zone, this was home. And she wasn't a threat. Still, as she returned to her truck, coffee in hand, the flashing lights came on. 3 patrol cars boxed her in, sirens blaring. Doors flew open, and officers quickly surrounded her. "Hands where we can see 'em," one barked. "Don't move," shouted another. Maya froze. Not out of fear, but out of experience. She had faced more dangerous situations than these men could imagine. She knew how quickly panic and ego could turn into violence. Her dogs jumped out behind her, leashed and ready. They didn't bark, they didn't growl, but they felt her tension. "I'm Sergeant Maya Lewis," she said calmly, raising her. "Hands, U.S. Army, my ID is in my left pocket." None of the officers moved to check. Instead, one placed his hand on his holstered weapon. "She's got dogs," he whispered to his partner. "Military grade, could be aggressive." "She's in camo," another muttered. "Could be impersonating." Maya's blood boiled. Impersonating? Did they not see the name tag, the military insignia, the rank on her chest? Or was that not the problem? Was the problem that a black woman, strong, composed, and clearly trained, didn't fit their idea of who belonged here? From the corner of her eye, she saw a white couple filming the scene. The woman whispered, "Oh my God, they're surrounding her." She didn't do anything, but the police didn't care. "Step away from the vehicle," the lead officer said. "We got a call about suspicious activity." "Suspicious?" Maya asked. "I'm getting coffee." "Ma'am, don't raise your voice." Her dogs tensed. Maya gave a low command. "Sit. Watch." Instantly, both dogs dropped to a seated position, their eyes locked on the officers, unblinking. They weren't just watching. They were waiting. And suddenly, you could feel it, the tension flipping in the air. The cops weren't in control anymore. The dogs, the woman, the silence, it all said one thing: you messed with the wrong soldier. The air was thick now, tense, heavy. Unspoken danger vibrating in every glance, every radio click, every inch of movement. Maya stood still. Her coffee cup was still in her hand. Her heart was calm, steady from years of training, but her eyes were sharp, scanning each officer, calculating reactions, noting fingers hovering dangerously close to triggers. She had trained with soldiers in Afghanistan. She had stared down insurgents in ambush zones, but this was worse. Because it was home, and they still saw her as a threat. Rex and Shadow remained seated beside her, unmoving, watching. Their ears twitched at every movement. Their muscles tense beneath their fur. These weren't pet dogs. They were elite military working dogs, trained to detect fear, to sense aggression, to defend at command. But Maya didn't command them yet. She waited. The lead officer stepped forward slowly, hand on holster. We received a report of a suspicious individual, possibly armed, traveling with aggressive dogs. Armed? Maya asked, lifting her eyebrows. I'm in uniform. I'm carrying a coffee, not a weapon. Ma'am, another officer said sharply, don't move. We're just trying to confirm your identity. And how exactly are you doing that? Maya replied calmly. Because you haven't asked for my ID, you haven't checked my plates, you haven't even radioed anything in yet. She could see it in their eyes. They didn't expect her to talk back. Not like this, not with control, not with confidence. She was supposed to be scared, intimidated, powerless, but instead, she was composed. She had presence, and worst of all, she had proof. Still, no one moved to verify her. No one reached for her ID. Instead, one officer whispered into his shoulder mic, "She's not complying." Possibly hostile. Maya's jaw clenched. That one sentence could get her killed. Shadow let out a low, guttural growl, a warning. Barely audible, but sharp enough to draw eyes. Another officer reached toward his taser. That's when Maya said two words. Not to the officers, but to her dogs. Stand ready. In an instant, Rex and Shadow shifted. Not lunging, not barking, but standing, tall, proud, positioned. With one paw slightly forward, heads tilted just enough to signal one thing. Try us. The officers took a step back. One of them cursed under his breath. What the hell kind of dogs are these? Maya turned her head slowly and answered without breaking eye contact. The kind that don't miss. The officers hesitated. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze in place. A moment where action could go either way. One wrong move, and it would erupt. But Maya stayed grounded. If I wasn't wearing this uniform, she said, voice low and sharp, you'd already have me on the ground. If I didn't have these dogs, I'd probably be in handcuffs. And if I wasn't trained to stay calm, this would already be on the news for the worst reasons. Silence, and then a distant voice crackled over the police radio. Dispatch. To units on scene, the subject is confirmed. Sergeant Maya Lewis, active duty, cleared, repeat, she is clear. One by one, the officers started to back off, but the damage had been done. They didn't find a criminal. They found a combat veteran. They didn't meet a threat. They tried to create one, but instead, they met discipline, dignity, and dogs trained for war. For a few seconds, the entire street felt like it had paused. No voices, no footsteps. Just the humming of police radios, and the silent judgment of two military K-9 South, standing like statues beside their handler. Rex and Shadow didn't move a muscle, but their message was loud and clear. They weren't just dogs, they were protectors. And they had locked in on the real threat, the ones with the badges. Every cop on the scene felt it. That sudden, eerie weight pressing down on them. Like the energy had shifted, like they were no longer the ones in control. The officers had surrounded Maya thinking she'd fold, that she'd fear them, that she'd try to run or shout or beg. But instead, she stood there, calm, silent, powerful, with two dogs whose eyes seemed to burn through their pride. The K-9 South didn't snarl, they didn't bark, they didn't need to. Their stillness was the warning, and to officers trained to read body language, it was terrifying. These aren't normal dogs, one officer mumbled under his breath. Nope, said Maya coolly, without even turning her head. They're trained to go after real threats, but only when I tell them to. The young officer across from her shifted uncomfortably. Sweat began to bead at his forehead despite the morning breeze. Behind Maya, her truck still rumbled quietly. Military plates gleaming in the sunlight. The whole street had fallen silent. Neighbors watched from windows. Someone on the sidewalk whispered, "She's not backing down." And she wasn't. She was doing what she'd done in war zones across the world, de-escalating with precision and patience, waiting for the moment when the enemy showed their hand. But this time, the enemy wasn't carrying AKs. They were wearing badges. Still, Maya made no sudden moves. Her voice remained steady. "You think these dogs are dangerous?" she asked. "You should see what they do to someone who actually tries to hurt me." Rex blinked slowly, never breaking eye contact with the officer nearest him. Shadow's chest rose and fell evenly, muscles taut under his coat. They were reading the room, as trained to do, picking up on tone, posture, heart rate. They knew who was afraid, who was aggressive, who was trying to mask it, and they knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding, this was profiling, this was racism, this was power being abused again. One officer, clearly nervous, stepped backward and bumped into a patrol car behind him. His hand hovered near his weapon, but something stopped him, not Maya's words. Not even the fear of being filmed. It was the dogs. They weren't lunging. They weren't aggressive, but somehow they looked unstoppable. Like ancient guardians pulled from myth, controlled not by rage but by honor. And suddenly, these officers, so used to barking orders, were the ones being watched, measured, judged. It was as if the canine South were saying, "We see you. We see what you're doing, and we dare you to keep going." Still, Maya kept her posture steady. "Let me guess," she said softly. "You thought I'd be scared? That I'd run? That I'd fall apart?" She turned slightly, just enough to look at the lead officer directly. "But here's what you didn't expect. A woman trained to lead, 2 dogs trained to defend, and all 3 of us trained to stay calm while you lose your grip." That's when it hit them. They weren't in control anymore. And worse, they never were. The silence hung like a storm about to break. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the air felt tighter, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Then, finally, the radio crackled. A voice from dispatch came through, loud and clear across every officer's radio. "Unit 5, be advised. Subject confirmed. Repeat, subject confirmed. Name, Sergeant Maya Lewis, Army, active duty, clearance level, high security. No warrants, no priors, she's clean," and just like that, everything shifted. One by one, the officers lowered their hands. The fingers that were once twitching near triggers now hung awkwardly by their sides. Their eyes dropped. Their voices vanished, they knew. They'd messed up, badly. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just stood there, still and silent, with Rex and Shadow beside her, unwavering. She watched as the officer who had started it all, the one who had called her a suspicious person, stepped back. His entire demeanor had changed. His chest wasn't puffed out anymore. His voice had lost its power. Sorry for the misunderstanding, Sergeant," he mumbled, not even meeting her eyes. "A misunderstanding?" she asked slowly, her tone sharp but steady. "You pulled weapons. You surrounded me. You treated me like a criminal." "No one meant any harm," another officer added, as if that fixed anything. Maya shook her head. "You didn't even ask for ID. You saw my skin color, and then you saw my dogs. That was enough for you to treat me like a threat." Silence again. Not one of them argued. Because they couldn't, everything had been caught on camera. The bystander still filming whispered to someone off-screen, "She's not letting them off the hook." Good. Rex and Shadow remained in their watch stance as if they were still waiting for an order, but there was no need. The damage had already been done, but Maya wasn't done. She stepped forward just one step and said loud enough for the entire block to hear, "You think my uniform protects me from racism? Asterisk, you think my rank makes me safe from judgment? Let me tell you something. It doesn't. Not here." She paused, scanning their faces. "Out there on the battlefield. I fight alongside people who would take a bullet for me, no matter what I look like. But here, in my own country, I get treated like an enemy just for walking down the street." The words hit harder than any punch. One officer tried to mutter something, maybe an excuse, maybe a defense, but the others didn't back him. They knew it wouldn't help. The truth was standing in front of them, wearing boots and a badge of honor, and 2 war dogs who were still staring them down without blinking. Maya looked over her shoulder toward the person filming. She gave a small nod, not for attention, but as permission. The world needed to see this, not out of anger, but out of reality. Because this wasn't just about her. This was about every strong black woman who'd ever been silenced, doubted, or falsely accused, no matter what uniform she wore. She turned back to the officers one last time. You wanted to scare me, but you forgot I've stood in places where fear doesn't survive, and these dogs, they only respond to real danger. So what does it say that they never moved? No one answered. Because deep down they knew the truth. The officers turned away one by one, retreating to their cars like men leaving a battlefield they never expected to lose. But there was no victory lap for Maya, no smug smile, no gloating. Just silence. She stood in the middle of that quiet street, her boots planted firmly on the concrete, her service dogs at her side, two warriors who had faced war zones but now stood guard in her own country. Against her own people? This was the moment Maya would remember for the rest of her life, not because she was afraid, not because of the confrontation, but because of what it said about the state of things, about how far they hadn't come. She didn't cry, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's a stare, a stance, a silence that makes the guilty squirm. The bystander who had filmed everything stepped closer. Are you okay? She asked softly. Maya glanced at her dogs, still locked in position. Then she gave a simple command. At ease. Rex and Shadow relaxed instantly, their bodies softening, tails lowering. Their job was done. Their presence had spoken volumes. They hadn't attacked. They hadn't needed to, but they had sent a message. You will not harm her. Not today. The video of the encounter hit the internet within hours. It spread like wildfire. Millions watched, a black female soldier surrounded by cops, standing tall while her military dogs kept them frozen in place. No weapons, no shouting, just strength, just presence, just truth. Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag Sergeant Maya, hashtag Black in Uniform. Hashtag She Stood Still, veterans spoke up, activists amplified it. News anchors called it a modern-day power shift caught on camera. But Maya, she posted only one photo. It showed her standing between Rex and Shadow in full uniform, her back straight, the American flag on her shoulder faintly visible in the sun. The caption read, Strength isn't about barking the loudest. It's about standing your ground when everything around you tells you to fall. This is what strength looks like. She didn't ask for fame. She didn't want followers. She wanted change. Because she knew the truth. If she had been in plain clothes, she might not have walked away. If she hadn't had those dogs, they might not have listened. And if no one had filmed it, no one might have believed her. But now, the world had seen it for themselves. Not just another viral video, but a mirror. One that showed how differently a black woman could be treated, even when she's done everything right, even when she's a soldier, a protector, a hero, and still she gets questioned, she gets cornered, she gets called suspicious. This isn't just Maya's story. It's a reminder that respect should not depend on your uniform, that silence can speak louder than sirens, and that sometimes it takes two dogs trained for war to hold up a mirror to society and say, look at yourselves. If this story moved, you type respect in the comments and make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more real, powerful stories the world needs to hear.